The fluorescent lights of the hospital flickered above me, humming like a warning I couldn't yet understand. My hands were still shaking from the drive, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air, when a nurse grabbed my wrist and whispered for me to hide. I didn't ask why. I just obeyed. And that's when I saw him. My husband. The man I thought was fighting for his life. Standing tall and healthy, murmuring to a woman half my age. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You'll understand how betrayal doesn't always come with raised voices. It comes with silence, with the sound of your heartbeat breaking in your own ears. That was the moment everything started to unravel. It was just after 7:15 a.m. when I got the call that changed everything. The nurse's voice was calm but urgent. My husband, Michael, had been admitted to Denver General after collapsing at work. My hands trembled as I grabbed my keys and ran to the car. The streets blurred as I drove, my heart pounding against the steering wheel. I remember whispering to myself over and over that he'd be fine, that maybe it was just exhaustion, that I'd walk into his room and see his smile again. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me as I rushed to the front desk, barely able to catch my breath. I told them his name, and the nurse glanced up. Something in her eyes shifted, like she recognized me but didn't know whether to speak. She leaned closer and whispered something that made my stomach drop. "Ma'am, don't go in yet. Hide over there, behind the curtain." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Hide from what I stared at her, waiting for an explanation. But she only gave a small nod toward the narrow curtain near the door. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I stepped quietly behind the fabric, pressing my hand to my chest to calm my breathing. Then I heard his voice. Clear, steady. Not the voice of a man clinging to life, but of someone calm and confident. I froze. He was supposed to be unconscious. My first thought was relief. He was alive. My second was confusion. Why was he talking so easily? Then came another sound. A woman's voice. Young, gentle, too familiar in tone to be professional. The air seemed to thicken around me. I could only hear fragments, but the rhythm of their conversation told me everything I needed to know. There was laughter, the scrape of a chair. His voice softened in a way I hadn't heard in years. In that moment, something inside me cracked. My knees went weak, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from making a sound. Every heartbeat was a thud of disbelief. I wasn't looking at a dying husband. I was looking at a man living a double life. When the nurse touched my shoulder, I stepped out from behind the curtain. Michael didn't even see me at first. He was too busy smiling at her. That was the moment everything I believed about my marriage collapsed. The hospital became a stage for the cruelest truth I could imagine. That love can look alive even when it's been dead for years. And standing there, frozen in that sterile room, I realized my old life had just ended. The woman who walked into that hospital wasn't the same one who would walk out. That was the morning my story truly began, though at the time, I had no idea just how far the truth would take me. If only I'd known how it all began. That morning in the hospital replayed over and over in my head. But the truth is, the story didn't start there. It started years earlier, in a life I was proud of, one I thought I had built with both hands and a clear mind. I grew up in a small town outside Des Moines, Iowa. My parents taught me that work was the only thing you could trust. I carried that lesson into my 30s and beyond, building a real estate business from the ground up. By 55, I had more than I'd ever dreamed of. A beautiful house in Denver, a thriving company, and a reputation for being the woman who could turn any patch of land into gold. I wasn't rich by luck. I was rich by grit. And yet, success can be lonely. My days were full of meetings and deadlines, my nights quiet and still. When I met Richard Turner at a charity gala, I wasn't looking for love, but he had that kind of presence that filled a room. He listened when I spoke. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. After so long alone, I let my guard down. It felt safe. It felt right. We married 2 years later. Our mornings began with coffee on the patio, watching the sun rise over the Rockies. He'd kiss my forehead, tell me he was proud of me, and I'd believe him. I believed in us. I believed in second chances. When he suggested skipping the prenup, I laughed and said love shouldn't need one. I thought I was proving my faith in him, in us. Looking back now, I see it differently. Every act of trust became a thread he could pull. Every moment of comfort was a soft edge he could use against me. I thought love meant safety. I didn't realize it was the beginning of danger. The air inside that hospital room felt wrong, too still, too quiet for what I was hearing. I crouched behind the curtain, my breath shallow, every muscle in my body rigid, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic, something like fear. My pulse thudded in my ears, so loud I worried they might hear it. At first, I thought I was misunderstanding. Michael's voice, calm, steady, almost tender, filled the space. The same tone he used when reassuring me about bills or contractors or weekend plans. Only this time, the words didn't fit that voice. I caught fragments: policy, transfer, executor. She'll never know. The younger woman murmured agreement, her tone careful, practiced. I froze. My mind searched for meaning that made sense. Some logical explanation, some innocent context. But the sentences kept landing like blows. They talked about timing, documents, signatures, about my properties, my accounts. And then, the word that split my world in half: accident. My throat closed. The air felt thin. The woman's voice softened, saying something about making it look natural, about her being so tired lately. Michael chuckled quietly, saying that everyone already believed I was under stress, that it wouldn't raise suspicion. The cold truth settled in my stomach like lead. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't misunderstanding. The man I shared a bed with had crafted a plan to end my life and profit from it. His supposed illness, the hospital stay, the sympathy. It was all part of the setup. My hands started to shake so badly I had to press them against the wall to steady myself. Sweat slid down my back, cold as ice. I could taste metal in my mouth, my body betraying me with terror. My mind screamed for logic, but all I found was chaos. I thought about the nights we spent watching the fire crackle in the living room, the way he'd rest his hand over mine and talk about the future. Now I realized that every we he spoke of had been a lie. His future never included me. It depended on me being gone. For a moment, I nearly stepped out. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but something deeper, older, Something primal held me back. It wasn't fear, it was survival. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, while they spoke about the last details, about how soon everything would be settled, about the money, about how easy it would all be. When their voices faded and footsteps echoed down the hall, I felt the room tilt. My knees gave out, and I slid down the wall, trying to swallow the sound of my own sob. My body felt both heavy and hollow. Every heartbeat whispered one truth: I was alone. The world didn't break with noise that day. It broke in silence, in the stillness of a hospital room where love had turned into danger. That was the moment my old life died. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the nurse, the same one who had warned me to hide. Her eyes were steady, her voice low. "Come with me," she said. And though I didn't know it then, that stranger's kindness would be the first step towards saving my life. My body wouldn't stop shaking. The world around me felt blurred, every sound sharpened to a painful edge. The beeping of a heart monitor, the shuffle of shoes on polished floors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I pressed my back against the cold wall, trying to steady my breath, when I felt a hand touch my arm. It was the nurse, the same woman who had told me to hide. Sarah. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried something I hadn't seen all day understanding. Without a word, she led me down a narrow hallway and into a small break room lit by a single lamp. The air there was still, safe. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat was raw, my chest tight. She handed me a glass of water, and I watched her hands, steady, deliberate, kind. When she finally spoke, her words weren't full of pity, but quiet conviction. She said she'd noticed things, odd behavior, strange paperwork, and that she couldn't ignore it anymore. It was the first time since the nightmare began that someone believed me, truly believed me. That simple act of empathy cracked through the fear that had wrapped around my heart. In that dim little room, surrounded by the hum of machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic, I found something I hadn't expected: hope. I realized then that goodness still existed, even in the darkest corners. And as I met Sarah's steady gaze, one thought took root inside me: I wouldn't be their victim. I would be their lesson. The world outside the hospital looked different that night. The city lights blurred through the car window as I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, listening to the quiet hum of the engine. For the first time in hours, no one was chasing me. No one was watching. The silence felt heavy. But inside that silence, something shifted. Fear had done its job. It had kept me alive. But now, it was useless. I wasn't going to run anymore. When I walked into my house, the space felt foreign. Every framed photo, every piece of furniture looked like part of a stage I'd built for a lie. I had given that man everything: my name, my home, my trust, and he had planned to bury me beneath it. The thought didn't break me this time. It focused me. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the empire I had built from nothing, and I realized something simple: he hadn't chosen a weak woman. He had chosen a powerful one, and misjudged her kindness for blindness. I sat down at my desk, turned on the lamp, and began to work. Not with panic, Not with tears, with precision. I called my lawyer and froze every joint account. I started gathering contracts, deeds, copies of insurance forms, every detail he had manipulated. I would now unravel, piece by piece. Sarah's words echoed in my head. She had said men like him always underestimate women like me. That kindness isn't weakness, it's restraint. I felt her courage settle into my bones like steel. By the time the sun began to rise, the fear was gone. All that remained was clarity. The same instinct that once built an empire now had a new purpose to take back my life and make them regret ever thinking I wouldn't fight. That night, I stopped being the woman they almost destroyed. I became the woman they would never forget. The night I decided to fight back, something in me clicked into place. Rage burned. Yes, but it was clean, focused, sharp. I knew that shouting or confronting him would only feed his control. I needed to be smarter, louder in silence. I started small. Every night after he fell asleep, I sat in the glow of my laptop, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I sifted through emails, bank records, insurance documents. I traced every dollar, every lie. The deeper I looked, the clearer the picture became. Shell accounts, transfers to the young woman, new policies written in my name. He'd built an empire on my trust. I was about to take it apart. Sarah helped quietly. She slipped me copies of hospital paperwork, dates that didn't match, signatures forged. Her calm courage steadied me. Between the two of us, we assembled a web of proof, too detailed to ignore, too dangerous to confront directly. There were moments when he looked at me a little too long, suspicion flickering in his eyes. My pulse would spike, but I never faltered. I still smiled, still poured his coffee, still asked about his meetings. Let him believe he still had control. Arrogance was his leash. I only needed to hold it long enough. When everything was ready, I sent it, every document, every recording, every statement, to the authorities. No name, no return address, just truth. 2 days later, the world shifted. Sirens in the distance, a call from his lawyer, and then silence. The kind that means it's over. I watched it unfold from my kitchen window. The man who once dictated my life now handcuffed, his perfect composure gone. I didn't feel triumph, just stillness. Justice isn't loud, it's quiet, precise, final. That night, I turned off the lights, sat in bed, and listened to the wind outside. For the first time in months, my body relaxed. The fear had drained away. My house was mine again. My life was mine again. For the first time in months, I slept. The morning the message came. The sky was pale and quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, when my phone buzzed. One text, 6 words. They've arrested Richard Turner this morning. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The steam from my cup rose into the silence, and it felt as if time itself held its breath. News travels fast in a city like Denver. Within an hour, neighbors were whispering, headlines flashing on local news, a respected businessman arrested for fraud, insurance manipulation, and conspiracy. His face, so familiar to me, now carried the word suspect beneath it. I didn't watch the footage live. I caught fragments later. a glimpse of him being led away. The same calm expression he always wore when he thought he could talk his way out of anything. But this time, his confidence had nowhere to land. The young woman beside him, the one who called him her future, looked small, cornered. Her name was out now, her life unraveling under the same light that had once blinded me. People called. Friends, acquaintances, business partners, all wanted to know if I was all right. I told them I was fine. And I was, mostly, not happy, not triumphant, just still. Justice doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like a door closing, soft and final. Later that afternoon, I sat in my garden, watching sunlight scatter across the stone path. I thought of Sarah, the nurse who had believed me when no one else did. I sent her a short message of thanks, though the words didn't seem enough. Richard's arrest didn't restore what I'd lost. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me something better. Space. Freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe without fear of what waited behind the next door. And as I sat there, in the calm after the storm, I knew one thing: it wasn't over yet. There was one last thing left to do. The hallway was colder than I expected. Each step I took echoed softly against the tiled floor. The sound steady, deliberate. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, their glow washing everything in pale gray. I could smell disinfectant, paper, and the faint trace of coffee from somewhere down the corridor. It was the kind of space where time seemed to hold its breath. When the officer opened the door, I saw him, Richard, sitting at a metal table. For a second, my chest tightened, out of habit more than love. He looked smaller now. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow. The sharpness that once defined him had dissolved into something fragile, almost pitiful. I stood across from him, hands folded in front of me, steady. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not suffocating. I realized then how much of my life had been shaped by his presence, his charm, his control, his deceit, and how little of it belonged to me while I carried his shadow. I spoke quietly, the words more for myself than for him. I told him I wasn't here to punish or forgive. I was here to end it, to take back the part of me he had stolen through fear and lies, that he no longer held any power. He looked up, searching for the reaction he used to command, but I gave him nothing, just calm, just truth. In that moment, something loosened inside me. The anger, the sorrow, the endless replay of what he'd done. It all dissolved. What remained was peace, light as breath. When I turned to leave, I didn't look back. The hallway felt brighter now, the air warmer. Sunlight from a high window caught the edge of the floor, a thin, golden line guiding my steps forward. As I stepped outside, the door closed behind me with a soft click. It didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like freedom. It's been months since the last time I saw him. The world feels quieter now, but in a good way. Mornings start differently. I wake before sunrise, make coffee, and open the curtains to let light spill into the kitchen. The air feels clean. The silence no longer presses against me. It holds me instead, steady and calm. I've rebuilt slowly, one piece at a time. I sold the house that carried too many ghosts and moved into a smaller one on the edge of Denver, surrounded by trees. I started volunteering at a local shelter. something I'd always said I'd do someday. Now I have the time and the heart for it. My days aren't about wealth or reputation anymore. They're about peace. Healing isn't neat. Some days, I still wake up with the memory of that hospital corridor, the whisper of betrayal lingering like a shadow. But I've learned that scars don't mean weakness. They're proof that I lived through something meant to destroy me, and I didn't let it. Forgiveness came quietly, almost without warning. Not for him, not for what he did, but for myself. I stopped replaying the pain. I stopped letting it define the boundaries of who I could be. I realized that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the grip of the past so the present can finally breathe. I think often about Sarah, the nurse who risked her job to save me. I send her messages sometimes. She never wanted credit, but she reminds me that goodness survives even in the darkest corners. Now, when I walk through the park, I feel something I thought I'd lost forever: gratitude for the lessons, for the chance to begin again, for the quiet strength that only comes after the storm. Life doesn't return to what it was. It becomes something new, something honest. I am not the woman I was before, and I don't want to be. I'm freer now, stronger. If you're listening and you've been through something that broke you, remember this: what's meant to end, you can also be what rebuilds you. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone tried to destroy you? Tell me your story. I read everyone. It's strange how time changes the shape of pain. What once felt sharp now feels distant, like an echo fading in the distance. I sit by the window each morning, watching the sun rise over the trees, and I realize I survived something that could have broken me completely. The air smells like coffee and new beginnings. The quiet feels like peace, not emptiness. Looking back, I see the woman I was before all this, the one who believed love meant safety, who thought trust was a shield. She wasn't foolish. She was hopeful. And maybe that's the most human thing we can be. Betrayal taught me that strength doesn't come from control or vengeance. It comes from surviving, from choosing to keep your heart open even when it's been shattered. I learned that revenge doesn't heal. Forgiveness does, but not the kind that excuses what was done. The kind that frees you from carrying the weight of what hurt you. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by understanding why it hurt and deciding it won't define you anymore. Justice gave me closure, but peace came later, quietly, without ceremony. It arrived in the small moments: the morning light through the window, the sound of birds outside, the laughter of a friend who never left. Life moved on, and so did I. If you've been betrayed, if you've had to rebuild, know this: your pain will not always be the loudest thing in your life. It softens, it changes, it teaches. Have you ever learned something powerful from heartbreak? Share it below. I truly read every story. Because in the end, that's what healing is: turning your wounds into wisdom and letting that wisdom light the way forward.